Radio.
Yes, 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 yes. If my aunt ruled the world, justice will prevail. Yes, this is the Truth Doctor coming to you tonight on Wake Up African People with my greatest and most important sister in my life in the black struggle, Queen Isis Aset. So we are here with you to talk about tonight one tragic, very tragic secret that the world is keeping. One of the most diabolical, vicious, humanitarian disasters in the world today in Australia, the apartheid in Australia. Yes, right now today, in this day and time, South Africa got out of their so-called apartheid. Now Australia is sitting there all alone. The British Empire knows, the American Empire knows, the whole European Empire knows. Everybody knows but the common people that the black people of Australia are being punished for being the owners of their land that was taken from them. They are put into what they call the outback. Some live in the cities that assimilated. Some that live in the city, like the sister that we're going to have on tonight, Kylie, never wanted to be assimilated and fights assimilation and wants to free her people. She wants to get this information out so the world can hear, and we are glad to have her on Wake Up African People. Now, Sister Kylie, I met her on the internet, and we were drawn together by the spirits. And I've been studying her country, long before I met her, and I quite knew a little bit about Australia. But you can never know more than a person who's living it. And she's living it. She's living in the atrocity. So we're going to bring Sister Kylie on, and we're going to want her to introduce herself. She has an English accent, so you people listen carefully because she speaks better English than we do. Okay? Sister Kylie, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Kylie, and I'm a Narungga Ghana woman from Adelaide in Australia, and that's Ghana not as in the country, that's Ghana as in I'm a descendant of a tribe that's now extinct, but I'm a descendant, and that's spelled K-A-U-R-N-A. K is pronounced G. I'm born and bred in Australia, grew up on an Aboriginal mission, where my family's from, Narungga people. So, yeah, that's me.
Yes.
And thank you also, Truth Doctor, for inviting me on your show.
Yes. Well, go ahead, Sister Aset, if you have something to say first.
I'm sorry, could you spell that tribe name again for those who are listening? The tribe you're from.
K-A-U-R. Can you hear me, Sister Aset?
Yes.
It's K-A-U-R-N-A, Ghana. It's like Ghana.
Karna. Karna. Karna tribe.
Yes. Ghana?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, now, sister, we want to know about what's going on over there and the job situation and the things about the alcohol abuse that they're claiming that the people are doing on their own, but they're not saying that that they are oppressing the people and making these people do it. I heard that children at the age of 9 years old are already committing suicide because they see hopelessness. Yeah. So could you elaborate on that, please?
I think white people here don't look at the cause. They just rather look at how we've been forced to live. They don't look at the cause. They're in denial about what they've done to us. Australia is a country that's in denial. The general population in Australia, not only the government, but the population, the people itself, refuse to accept the atrocities they've committed on my people in this country. We've got a debate in Australia at the moment whether those atrocities should be added to the national curriculum in education. A lot of ministers in Parliament, especially the Federal Education Minister, doesn't want that to be included in the national curriculum, but rather keeping Australia's facade that it's, it was founded in 1788 by Captain James Cook, and although Terra Nullius was overturned by the Mabo case in 92 when they invaded here, but they want to keep this fake facade that Australia is a wonderful multicultural, racist-free nation. Meanwhile, you have 500,000 people. That's our total population in Australia today, only 500,000. So bear in mind, when I'm talking about all these issues that's going to be discussed tonight, we're only dealing with a very small population of people. Severe atrocities continuing today. The government is still continuing genocide on us today. And I think that's got a lot to do with how this country was invaded. We didn't, under Terra Nullius. Like I said, that doctrine was overturned in the High Court in 92. And ever since then, they've been in denial. They basically want us out of the way so they can continue to, benefit from our land. They've created a lot of wealth, generational wealth for themselves. Meanwhile, a lot of Aboriginal people live in third world conditions. A lot of remote Aboriginal communities don't have running water, therefore they suffer third world health conditions, where countries like Bangladesh have combated those third world health conditions, and yet they're rampant in Aboriginal communities in Australia in 2014.
That is sure. Most people here in America and, in most other countries would not even know, because they are really keeping it secret, and they're flying the banner of justice, and they're going around talking about helping other countries. They're even talking about apartheid wasn't right. And they got apartheid that makes the South African apartheid look like a joke, because they're exterminating the black people over there. Now, can you tell us about, I was reading an article that they were poisoning, they were bragging Captain Cook. He is your equivalent to our Columbus, that so-called discovers America. How you could discover something that somebody already lived there? That's like me coming to somebody's house and setting up camp, talking about I discovered your home, or I discovered your woman or something. This is sickening. This is atrocity, and everybody that gets this radio program needs to share it with everybody and make sure that this message goes out. I hope this message goes out around the world to let people know that the atrocities that are happening in Australia have to be stopped, because this is how the truth doctor feels, that exposure and exposing these people, to the world will help our people. Now, I wish we were in a position to go over there and free our people and take these white people and kick them out the land. But we have not that power yet. So we have to use the strategy of using our voices and making the people of the world understand that these people's human rights need to be respected like anybody else's. So let's hear a little bit about Captain Cook, because I heard the Hawaiian brothers killed this punk ass. So go ahead and tell us about Captain Cook, sister.
Yeah, that's what they say. That when he left here, he went to Hawaii, and they killed him in Hawaii. But when they came here in 1788, like I said, when they invaded this country and planted the British flag, they sent word back to the United Kingdom to say the land was terra nullius, meaning uninhabited land. That was a false doctrine, because we are the only indigenous peoples in the world that do not have a treaty with our invaders, which is also another current debate at the moment with including us in the Australian Constitution. I personally don't agree with that, because it's their document, it's in their terms, so I feel that we don't know what we're getting ourselves into. I think if we do that there, go into the Australian Constitution and be recognised, our sovereignty will be ceded, therefore we will not get a treaty. I'm not saying in other countries like New Zealand and even the United States, for example, that their problems don't exist, but I've been to New Zealand and I've seen the result of a treaty is far better than what it is in Australia. Language and customs have been maintained. Maori people still actually fluently speak their language. This is city people, city Maori people. A lot of signs are in the Maori language. Maori language is taught in schools. They have their own schools where they can go from pre-primary school right through to high school. They even have their own universities. All this is a result of a treaty. When they invaded Australia, they refused to even acknowledge us. Therefore, that's why it's important that we need a treaty in this country. When they did come here, they came with disease, smallpox, and other diseases like that. They just can't think off the top of my head. I did have a list.
Diphtheria.
And that's wiped out 90% of the population around Sydney Cove, or Botany Bay, it was what they call it, white people, Botany Bay in Sydney.
Yeah.
The disease alone wiped out 90% of the Aboriginal population around Sydney area.
Yes,
and then not only that, you had the massacres.
Sister Kylie.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep. Let me say this. Botany Bay, if anybody don't know about Botany Bay, they made movies about this place. This is how scandalous this place was. It was a prison. England dumped the worst of England, just like they did in America. They dumped their prisoners, their rapists, their killers. They dumped out the most vicious, most uncivilized Europeans and dirty and nasty and stinking devils out on these people. And they went over there with their stank caveman ass and said these people were subhuman or no human at all. And this is what gets me. This is what gets me. These beautiful black people are being exterminated by these devils. And I'm calling them devils because the word devil only means evil. Don't mean nobody down in the ground. They're on top of the ground. And they're our worst enemies. And don't forget that. If you're walking around here hugging them, kissing them, laying with them, sleeping with them, doing all kinds of things with them, you might as well consider yourself into bestiality, because these people are not human. Because
I agree. I certainly.
Yes, another human being can't do these type of things that they do. I mean, in the history of the whole world, you have no people that can even equate treachery and the evil of the European. So I want to talk about the babies, how they used to bury the babies in the ground and then kick their heads off in this forced assimilation when they took, I think it was 6,000 children. Talk about that, sister.
Under the assimilation policy from 1930 through, white people will tell you to 1960, but that policy actually lasted up until when I was born in the 1970s. And during that period, they took away just over 100,000 babies and children, forcibly removed, stolen them from their mothers, from their families, from their culture and heritage, from their land, because a lot of them was taken away from their own country and taken to another black person's country, another tribal area. They was told that their parents didn't want them, their parents were dead, their mother was a prostitute, their father was a drunk. So basically they brainwashed these children to hate themselves, hate their culture. They was forbidden to speak their language. These little children were institutionalized. They were put into institutions, sexually abused, molested, beaten. So not only the physical aspect of it, but also the psychological aspect of it. And then it depends also on what state you're in, because each state had a protector of Aboriginalities. I'm sure you all know of the movie Rabbit Proof Fence. That was a true story. But keep in mind, that's only one story out of thousands. One story. And A. O'Neill was the chief protector in Western Australia, because that happened in Western Australia, that story, Rabbit Proof Fence. So each state had a protector of Aborigines, and he was the legal guardian for Aboriginal children that was stolen from their parents up until, well, the ages varied. Western Australia was 16 years of age. Here where I am in South Australia was 18 years of age. So these little children was institutionalised, and when they became of age, 16 or 18, it was very much like if you led a life, someone who went into jail when they was 18 and they come out at 50. That person wouldn't know how to survive in the world. Usually someone like that would commit a crime to go back into prison because they can't cut it out in the real world. They haven't been taught the life skills. So those little children were never taught life skills. They were just basically trained to clean and work for white people. That was slave labour. Australia doesn't recognise that as slavery. They never use the term slavery here. A lot of Aboriginal people, even outside the stolen generation, worked for free and were told that their wages were put into a trust fund, a state government trust fund, and that they would get that trust fund when they turned a certain age. Even older adults were told the same thing, that their money was put into a trust fund. And they were, rather than being paid their wage, they was paid in tea, flour, sugar or tobacco. So a lot of these, getting back to the stolen generation, Truth Doctor, a lot of those little children grew up without the love of the parents. So a lot of them didn't have the life skills when they, the government said, thank you very much for your service. You're 16 or you're 18, go along your way. A lot of them turned to drugs, a lot of them killed themselves. So they was dispossessed not only from their tribal area, but also from their culture and their family. So they were lost. When they came out of them institutions or out of white people's homes after service, they had nowhere to go. They didn't know who their family was. You might have had someone come down from, say, 1,000 kilometres away from up north that might have been in a home down here in Adelaide. They wouldn't know who their people was, not knowing that their people was 1,000 kilometres away up north, because they weren't told anything, where they come from. A lot of them also were given new identities as well, different names.
It's a shame. Well, sister, this thing is almost, it's almost tearful, because, this is happening to black people. I mean, if a black person can't have, sympathy for this, you might not even be human anymore, because you've been exposed to the beast for too long. So let me tell you this. I want to talk about the British equivalent to Hiroshima over there, and dropping the atomic bomb on the Aboriginal people and saying that no people were there. Could you talk about that and how the people are still suffering from radiation sickness to this day? Yep.
That happened at Maralinga, and Maralinga is about 800 kilometres from where I am. It's within the state of South Australia. In the 1940s, the Australian government allowed the British government to test their nuclear weapons within that area. I don't know the exact figures for the landmass, but it's quite a large area with several different Aboriginal tribes or groups living within that area. So the British was allowed to test their nuclear weapons there, regardless of the fact that Aboriginal people were living on that land. So today that land is highly contaminated with uranium, and they can't hunt off the land anymore. The animals is contaminated. There's groundwater there that's contaminated. The soil itself is contaminated, and then the people are contaminated. They are cancer, very, very high risk of cancer, birth defects, and this is generational. So someone, a mother might have a child, and that child might be born with club feet. And this is up until this very day, from 1940 to the current day. So it's altered their genes. Babies are dying, children are dying from health complications, adults are dying as a result. Now, these people try to take the Australian government to court. I'm not sure what year that was. The Australian government said, no, it wasn't our fault, you need to sue the British government. So that court case didn't get anywhere, and they didn't get any compensation for what happened to them, and neither did the Stolen Generation get any compensation for what happened to them, and they tried to take the Australian government to court also. But in 2008, the then Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, in reference to the Stolen Generation, gave a national apology, a sorry day, and specifically said after in the media that compensation will not be rewarded to the Stolen Generation. So that's what happened out at Maralinga, and another place nearby where they actually mine uranium is Roxby Downs. That's also in the same state where I live. Australia, uranium is what they mine. We hold the biggest resources of uranium in the world. Second to that is iron ore, and then other minerals. So
they're stripping the land. So that's what the European always did. He didn't have anything in Europe. Europe is a desolate, cold, dark place, just like hell, where the devil come from. So let me tell you this. These people need to be stopped. Black people need to wake up. Yellow people need to wake up. Red people need to wake up. The world needs to wake up before the world will be no more. Because these people are stripping the earth of all its natural resources. In the earth, we don't even need these resources. Our ancestors didn't even use things like this. They lived in harmony with the earth. They maybe used wood to burn, but they took from the earth only, into a part where it would not hurt the earth. Because when you hurt the earth, you hurt yourself, because you're part of the earth. But being that these people are not human, and they may not even be of this earth, I don't know where the hell they came from. Some people want to say the caves. It may be a meteorite. I don't know wherever the hell they came from, but they need to go to hell back. I am praying to the Most High.
Yes, they do.
God.
Please go back.
Of Africa, of the black man, worldwide, to take this beast out of here. I hope the sun, Amun-Ra, comes closer to the earth to burn these goddamn devils out of here. Because something has to be done before we don't have no planet anymore. See, people, they ain't taking this serious enough. The planet is in peril. These people are destroying our only home. Where do we have to go after the earth is gone? They don't care about the earth because they're not of this earth. I don't know where the hell they come from.
Exactly.
But I'm not even trying to know where the hell they come from. I just want them gone. And if I had the power to do it, they will be gone in a flash. It'll be quicker than you can ever even, a blink of an eye. Blink of an eye is slow compared to how fast I had their asses out of here. Now, my sister, let's talk about the people that they extinct there, because it's different tribes that had different characteristics. Because I heard that it's one tribe that blew this long horn made out of wood. It was a long horn, but now they like it, so you can make money doing that. So all the tribes now that didn't even have the horn or blow the horn are blowing it. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's the didgeridoo, and the didgeridoo come from one group of people in Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory, the Yulungu people. They're the only people that have that instrument, but now because tourism and Aboriginal tourism also, which brings in a lot of money into the Australian tourism industry, that people want to come in and see Aboriginal people in their natural environment. So now a lot of people, Aboriginal people, have adopted that instrument today. So, for example, if there's a ceremony down here where I am, they'll have our normal instruments that we would use, like clapsticks or boomerangs, and they'll couple that with, traditional dance and song with the didgeridoo. But that particular instrument comes from only one people. But because, tourists come here from abroad and they want to see Aboriginal people perform, but personally I think that's got to stop too, because we're not entertainers. We got other things that need to be addressed, rather than entertaining white people. I mean, it's all well and good that they want to know about us, but there's another side to us that they should know first and foremost before knowing about our song and our dance here. And that instrument is a male instrument, and it's a sacred instrument. And I know at the moment now in Melbourne, they're having a didgeridoo festival. It's white people that have organised this festival, which is totally disrespectful, because that's a male instrument and that's a sacred instrument. Women aren't supposed to touch it or play it, and usually they'll have that instrument for their ceremonies, their sacred ceremonies, and then they'll paint the story of the ceremony on the instrument. But yeah, it only comes from one particular tribe in Australia.
Now, I think what was the year that they celebrated their 200-year independence, sister?
They celebrated that in 1988, 200 years.
Yes. Now I want to ask you. Yes, I want to ask you this. I'm sorry to overtalk you there, but I want to get specific to this question. I didn't want to get the date wrong. Now, I hear that they captured and locked up and forced Aboriginals, put them in jail, and told them they would cut off their food, cut off their rations, and cut off everything, the handouts that these devils are giving them. You know what I'm saying? If they didn't act like natives, even though they done Europeanized them and made them act like Europeans, but now being that they want to celebrate their thing with a boat coming in, acting like Captain Cook, and the natives standing there with their spears and everything, and they forced these people, after they forced them to be westernized, then they reforced them to do this, to play these parts, so they can have a celebration that white people all over the world can come see these people that they're saying is savage because they only had the spear. See, we talk about that.
Yep. That was in 1988. And they did have there was a nationwide celebration for their invasion and what they basically ignored us. There was planned protests by Aboriginal people, especially in Sydney, but that was locked down. So a lot of those people was under investigation and under the watchful eye of the government. You did have your few sellouts that didn't consider the fact what they did to us and did go along and be part of that celebration, which is wrong. Then they also the federal government at that time brought in legislation. Can't remember the name of the act. It had 1988 in it, and if we decided to have T-shirts made up with 88 or black or Australia within any promotional stuff like T-shirts, flyers, or organising rallies in protest, it was against the law. The government brought in legislation to prohibit Aboriginal people from protesting or using 88 in any public material.
Well, sister, the more and more that you talk about this, is the more and more I get really, really upset. So let me tell you, this is the most tragic abuse of human rights in the world today. Now, why would these people have to sign a treaty with the invader? You know, why? Why would they, you know, these people came in your house, kicked your door in, slaughtered your people, took your land, excuse me, stripping the resources out of the land, poisoning the people, and they want you to sign a treaty. This shit is crazy. These people
No, they don't want us to sign a treaty.
Yeah.
They don't want a treaty. A treaty has been debated for a very long time in this country. We've always been calling for a treaty. Rather than a treaty, they've brought in this recognising us in the Australian Constitution. And this is why these policies was brought in. Assimilation and other policies was brought in because Section 51 of the Constitution, at one time before the 1960s referendum, the Australian government wasn't allowed to make laws for us. It was in their Constitution, although they did. But they went against what they'd written in their founding document. That's why I don't agree with us going into the Constitution, recognised as the first peoples of this country. I think I mentioned that earlier. Rather, a treaty is important because I don't think a blanket treaty. I think the treaties need to be between each and every individual tribe in this country with the federal government. And many people will say that native title agreements are treaties. They're not treaties. And Aboriginal people don't really have any rights to land under native title except to continue their own cultural practices to land. They cannot have any economic industry to create infrastructure or an economy for themselves under native title. So that's very racist legislation within itself. So native agreements with native title are not treaties. And like I said earlier, these white people are not going anywhere in a hurry. And they have to be held accountable. They've brainwashed thousands of Australians to say that this recognised campaign is wonderful and Aboriginal people are going to be in the Constitution. That's actually a distraction from what we really need, and that's a treaty. There needs to be negotiation, and those terms of those treaties need to be on our terms and not theirs. Terms in prison, health, education, lack of unemployment, which is very high, and it's absolutely shocking considering that this is the first world country. It's the 13th richest country in the world, and you have Aboriginal people living here, only 500,000. Keep in mind we're only talking about a small number of the Australian population that has the highest numbers in terms of lack of essential services to health, education, basic amenities. Also up in the Northern Territory, where you have one community will just have one tap, and that tap is outside, and this is 2014. You have a community sharing one tap and washing their children, washing themselves from one tap, and no sanitation. Hence, the diseases that are in third world countries. Trachoma, glue. A lot of people up there is deaf. A lot of people up there is blind, and chronic diseases are rampant. And also, it's not much better. The conditions aren't even much better in the cities.
So Australia is actually surrounded by water, right?
Yeah.
So that would be considered an island. I heard somebody said it was considered a small continent or something. Is that true?
It's debatable. Some people will say it's, did you say island, Truth Doctor? I would consider it a continent because you've got, over 600 different tribes here still, 600 different nations. So I usually refer to Australia as a continent, similar to Africa. People saying Africa is not a country, it's a continent because of all the different nations within it. So I refer to Australia as a continent, considering I'm a black person, Aboriginal woman.
Yes, so Kylie.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask, going back to the history of the country and the invasion, and on up until the 70s, I think you were saying, on up until the 70s, how many original people do you think that the British murdered? How big is this number? Is there even an estimation?
There is estimations, but a lot of those estimations are by white people. A lot of our history hasn't been recorded, and they've only recorded a select few events that have happened. So a lot of it's not recorded, but there was a number that there may have been just over 1 million Aboriginal people prior to the invasion, and that within the first, I think it was maybe 10 years, 500,000 people were killed, massacred, slaughtered, and died through disease. Whether 1 million at the time is correct, I'm not sure, because we only make up 500,000 today in Australia.
Right.
So, and then Aboriginal people still are dying every day through poor quality of life. Just alone between Howard was John Howard was Prime Minister. 90,000 Aboriginal people died within 11 years of preventable diseases. 90,000. And then you had infant deaths in that same period when he was Prime Minister. Aboriginal babies totaled to 1,600 deaths. So Aboriginal people are dying every day at a shocking rate that the government refuses to. They got no intention, actually, of fixing the problem, and they're actually committing genocide. I see it as genocide. There's no other way of looking at what the Australian government is doing to us here other than genocide. Even though they've ratified the convention in 1948, I think it was, and Australia was one of the first to ratify that after they brought that convention in for the Jews, but totally disregarded the crime of genocide that they are committing in our country, my country.
Well, that's how they do. See, the British have actually, the British have actually genocided more people than any other people on earth, the British Empire. But you never hear about the British genocides, because anywhere you see these people still living today, and you know they're not from there, you know they're from Europe originally, 9 times out of 10, the people were genocided. Maybe 10 times out of 10, the people were genocided, but some of them were totally genocided, some of them were. And now, talking about total genocide, I want to talk about the island of Tasmania, where they wiped out every last person. To one sister, I believe in 1920, she died, but before she died, she begged them, please do not skin her and take her bones and, put string on her bones or wire on her bones and take her and put her in a museum for people to come see, like she's a monkey or an animal or something like that, because they were small, people of small stature. Let's talk about that, sister, and how they hunted them down and killed them.
Tasmania is like equivalent to your Hawaii, so that's part of that's the state of Australia. That was the penal colony. They were usually sent to Tasmania first, and at the time it was known as Van Diemen's Land, which is the correct name for it. So they were all sent down there. But prior to that there, you had, I think it was a number of like 6,000 Aboriginal people that were on the island at the time. And they were wiped clean off the face of the earth. However, through massacres, like they were hunted down. Also, another thing I just want to quickly say is that we came under the Flora and Fauna Act. So if in the frontier wars, or if you white people decided to round up a posse and go and kill an Aboriginal person because they stole one head of cattle, you're actually killing an animal. You weren't killing a human being. And we were never recognised also as citizens in this country until the 1967 referendum. Just going back to Tasmania, those people do exist down there. I mean, they had frontier wars down there, and Aboriginal people will run off cliffs. A good book for that there is Blood on the Wattle. I don't know who the author is for that there, but that will give you an idea of just what white people did to us there. So a lot of them were massacred in what I was just talking about just then, because resources started to become scarce for Aboriginal people. So they turned to things, and then, like burning their crops and killing their cattle out of, what they were doing to Aboriginal people. So white people took revenge through massacres. So they wiped out the population down in Tasmania, but today those people are the descendants. Aboriginal people are still down there, and they are descendants of the original people. And they're very fair in complexion, but they do identify as Aboriginal people, and they're treated as such as well in terms of racism and discrimination based on their heritage. Even though they might be fair and not have so much colour in their skin, they're still discriminated against because they're Aboriginal.
Well,
so Tasmania, sorry,
no, go ahead. Finish, sister. I'm sorry. I didn't know you had more to say. Go ahead.
I was just going to quickly say that severe impact was around coastal areas rather than inland Australia. So more people and more tribes, because not only in Tasmania, but tribes were wiped out on mainland Australia as well, in places like New South Wales, here in South Australia, Tasmania, and Western Australia, where land was more fertile and similar to what it was back in the United Kingdom, and that was the land they wanted to farm and have their livestock on. It was fertile. So these white people here don't realise when they're walking around on the blood spilt. My ancestors' blood. You have mass grave sites where black people are just being herded in and thrown into, or sometimes just left where they've been shot and killed. So then invasion had more severe impact of Aboriginal people in coastal areas, because most of the population of Australia, which is around 23 million people, live on the coast. So that's why in remote areas, Aboriginal people in remote areas, their culture and their custom is still very strong. And English might be their second or third language, because basically because of the difference in land, very hot, dry, arid, and white people couldn't penetrate that. So they're lucky in that sense.
So now we talk about the white people in England and in Australia not recognizing that the Aboriginals have any type of real human rights. I mean, they're still trying to get the rights that black people in America had, but don't get it wrong. Black people in America are still brainwashed, and majority of them are Negro people slaves. You know, so I mean, it may look good on this side, but they just using a little bit of different tactic because this land is not big enough for all of them to control. So they need different minorities and different people to come in here to work for them because they've always been too lazy to do their hard work themselves, to fight their wars and all that. I want you to talk about, well, I want to first ask this question, then I'll go back to what I was getting ready to ask you. The British doesn't, like I said, recognize you, but the United Nations don't even recognize y'all as well, right?
We are under the, they have a, I think it's World Indigenous, I just can't think of the name of that convention off the top of my head, but we are recognised, and the UN does have, I think it's every 3 or 4 years, get together there with all Indigenous peoples to just discuss all these issues that's going on back in the homeland. But nothing has ever changed. Nothing has become of that. The Australian government totally ignores what the UN has recommended. We've had the special rapporteur from the United Nations out here several times and going out into remote communities and seeing the conditions. And it's another one now, but the one prior to that was a man. I can't think of his name. He equated that to actually worse than a third world country. You have a lot of people out there that don't even have a kitchen. They might have a physical kitchen with a bench top and whatnot, but they won't have a stove. A lot of them go to cook outside on the fires. You might have 25 people living in a 3-bedroom house with no running water. Yeah, and then you might have some families that putting up galvanised tin sheeting and throwing a mattress on the ground and living like that. That's their home. And the reason why the government is doing that is because they use an Aboriginal people's human rights, but they're holding it ransom because the government wants to have lease to that land, and they did get that land back under native title, but like I said, they can't do anything economically on it, and they can only use the land for their cultural. Continue their cultural customs. They found minerals under those communities, hence the Northern Territory intervention, if anyone wanted to Google that there. So they want the land, and they're holding Aboriginal people's human rights until they sign the lease it back to the federal government. So those people, I think there's only one community up there that's went into signed the land back to the government. The rest haven't, and the rest are suffering. And, you know, prison rates in Western Australia, 83%, I think, in Northern Territory, 83% is the black prison population up there. Like I said, health is shocking. 53 years of age is the average lifespan compared to 70 for white Australia. Death rate is 2.2%. That's in comparison. Now, let me just say, the death rate is 2.2%. Compare that with the death rate of Australian sheep, which is 2.4%. There's not much of a difference in the sheep compared to human people in this country. Yeah, so the average lifespan is 53 years of age, and also that depends on your community and where you come from. 53 would be, I would say that's across the board, because I live in my community. I'm not a removed black person. I've always lived in my community, and from what I see around me and people that's dying around me, there's a lot of people that is my age that I grew up with that's no longer around. They're having strokes in their 40s or late 30s. They're having heart attacks. And all that comes down to quality of life, because we refuse employment. Unemployment is very, very high in the Aboriginal community, and the only people that employ us is the government. Well, the government pays itself actually to employ us, and that's only through Aboriginal initiatives or Aboriginal schemes or if you're lucky enough to get a job with Aboriginal Legal Service or the Aboriginal Health Services, or an initiative run in the government department for Aboriginal people or the Aboriginal community. Other than that, you won't get employment. You can't walk into any of the fast food places. A young Aboriginal person can't go in there and say, this is my resume, I'd like to apply for a job. That will not happen. It's never happened and it never will happen. So unemployment is very, very high, and hence you have 10-year-olds in this country killing themselves. We have the highest youth suicide rate in the world. 10-year-olds to 17-year-olds are killing themselves because they don't see a future. There's no hope for them. You get a lot of Aboriginal people that do drink, that are on drugs, and crack and heroin in the cities is a big problem for Aboriginal people, combined with alcohol in remote areas, because there's no hope. There's no hope. We are lucky if any of our kids finish primary school. That's how bad it is in terms of education. Extremely lucky if any go on to high school. Very, very fortunate if any go to university. So that's the state of education. A lot of Aboriginal people are illiterate because of that. And then that comes back to, like I said, quality of life. We don't have the same quality of life. We refuse that equal to that of white Australia. So the statistics actually is very, very alarming, and Australia should be ashamed of themselves. This country actually locks up Aboriginal people greater than black people in South Africa. In South Africa, it's 851 per 100,000 people. In Australia, that's 4,300 or so Aboriginal people per 100,000. 4,000 per 100,000 compared to South Africa, which is 851 per 100. That's an alarming statistic. Very, very alarming.
Oh, wow. Unbelievable. So, because of, you said there's unemployment, are you saying that there's no access to health care for the people around you? Or are the services limited, like at what they offer you, depending on where you stay at?
There is.
How does that work?
Yeah, depending on where you live. Remote. This is what I said earlier about preventable diseases. 90,000 Aboriginal people died of preventable diseases under the Howard government, which was from 97, I think, to 2006. 90,000. People in remote areas because of lack of isolation, geographical location, and no access to medical care. If an Aboriginal person in a remote community has renal failure, sorry, Sister Acid?
I was asking, how is it in the cities?
In the cities, it's not much different. We have Aboriginal health services in the cities, but those services provide very basic and substandard health care for Aboriginal people. So it's not much different in the cities because health also is a reflection of lack of unemployment and quality. Because of lack of unemployment, quality of life. A lot of people can't afford to see a specialist or to see a good. We basically get what we get from the health services. And then when you go into the hospitals, because admissions rate also for Aboriginal people is very high, 71% for men and 53%, I think, for women. Then you're going to deal with racism from hospital staff as well. So there's not much of a difference between remote and rural and urban Aboriginal people. It's not much of a difference.
That is true.
Well, let's talk about all the Aboriginal people that fought in the wars, and even the ones that went to Africa and fought for the Australians there and Papua New Guinea. Could you talk about that?
There was Aboriginal men and servicewomen over the years, and Aboriginal people fought in all the wars Australia was involved in. But you also have to bear in mind that they fought for this country when this country didn't even recognise them as citizens, and they weren't entitled to the same rights as white diggers, white soldiers. A lot of women if their husband was killed at war, didn't receive a widow's benefit, and that's across the board. That was anything. I think it was before '67. Anything to do with social security payments, it was all half that of white people. A lot of that. Well, just quickly with the Boer War. Aboriginal servicemen went over to fight in that war. I think it was at late 1800s, and the White Australia policy was in at the time. And just the White Australia policy came into play from the time of Federation of 1901 up until 75, I think it was, when Gough Whitlam became Prime Minister, and he dismantled it. So Aboriginal servicemen went over to fight in the Boer War. They were left over there. They were left in South Africa. And they were prohibited to re-enter Australia because of White Australia policy. It was an immigration policy that prohibited non-white people from entering into Australia. So even though that they as Aboriginal, they're the original people of this country, they were born here, and they've lived here for 60,000 years, they went to fight for a country that wouldn't allow them to re-enter and come back home. So a lot of those old men settled down with African women in South Africa and had families in South Africa. And my father actually met someone a few months ago who came this way looking for his grandfather because his grandfather was Aboriginal, black South African man. So that was the result of the White Australia policy. Even though they put their lives on the line for this country, they was prohibited to come back in and didn't also receive any of the entitlements or benefits that a white serviceman would receive. As for PNG, yep.
So there's an element of Aboriginals in South Africa today?
Yes, but I'm not sure in terms of the numbers, how many were actually left there. But I know that the ones that did fight and go over there were left there. They couldn't return due to the White Australia policy. So there's people in South Africa that are direct descendants of Aboriginal people.
So they took them into war and then abandoned them and wouldn't let them back in the country.
Yep.
These people are total evil. I mean, they are evil beyond compare. And I just want to say this, that back in the 1920s, Marcus Garvey's movement made it to Australia. And they had the Universal Aboriginal Improvement Association and community leagues, Aboriginal community leagues in that country. And I am a Garveyite, and I belong to Division 121 in Philadelphia, PA. And the Garvey movement is still alive. We at 1609 Cecil B. Moore Avenue, Philadelphia. If you're about black, you're about building up your people, you're about self-help, self-development, and building our people into an independent collective, come on down there and join us, because the Garvey movement is still alive. Now we want to talk about the other movement that made it in the 60s there. And Dennis Walker, who started the Aboriginal Black Panther Party, that they were, you know, seeing the Black Power movement here in America and the Civil Rights movement in America, and they adopted our movement here. Let's talk about Dennis, the great Dennis Walker.
Yes, bless him. Dennis Walker was a Murray man from Queen. Sorry, Truth Doctor?
I said a bad black man.
Yes, rest in peace. He was a Murray man. I'm not particularly sure of his tribe within the state of Queensland himself, but he was a Murray man from Queensland. The term Murray is a blanket term for all Aboriginal people in Queensland. And he founded the Black Panther Party in 1972 in Queensland. And the basic principles of it was what it was in the United States. And that wasn't the only one that was adopted as well here. I mean, like you said, with Marcus Garvey, there was delegates also, Aboriginal Australian delegates that went over in the 1920s to hear him speak at one of the conventions in, I think it was Harlem, and actually wrote to, what's his newspaper? Is it the World Negro? Is that the paper at the time?
It's called the Negro World.
That's it, yeah. So correspondence was, you know, letters were written and were published in that at the time. But the Black Panther Party tried to, well, actually they took it international. A lot of them went over to the UK to let people over there know what the Australian government was doing. There was a woman also by the name of Roberta Sykes. Now, she is accepted and she identifies as an Aboriginal woman, but her father was actually an African-American soldier from World War II. But she never knew this as a young girl, so she grew up identifying with and calling herself Aboriginal. She was accepted in the community as such. She was also part of that movement as well with Dennis. But the sooner, that got shut down very quickly, so that didn't last for very long at all. It was classified and put in papers as a violent militant group. And I think it had support also from the Australian Communist Party at the time, and that got shut down as well. That was a political party that didn't go anywhere. And then also you had the freedom rides here, that was adopted as well from the civil rights era over where you are. But that was only confined to, that was headed by a man named Charles Perkins. He's an Aranda man from Alice Springs. And he was part of the Stolen Generation, also Charles Perkins. But that was confined to New South Wales. So that didn't go Australia-wide. So a lot of what we tried to adopt here from Black America didn't last that very long. They shut it down. As soon as it opened, as soon as it started doing a few things in the communities, it got shut down. So those didn't last as long, didn't have a greater impact either like it did in the United States.
Well, look, we're getting down to almost 20 minutes or 22 minutes before the ending of the show, and we want to bring in the callers. Sister Hassan, go ahead and get some of the callers and see if they want to ask any questions to the Sister Kylie. Did you hear me, Sister Hassan? Oh, I think Sister Hassan's not with her. Oh, there she go. Okay.
No, she's here. She's here. She's not going anywhere. Not for a show like this. Yeah. Actually, we have no callers in queue. We had a couple of people, but they've since hung up. This is an important show.
Mhm.
And
well, it's gonna be in the archives because you know a lot of people download the show. They download the show and they see the show later. But it might be better that we don't.
Huge download.
It might. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Sister. I said I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that I think this is gonna be a huge show. I had a few people tell me today that they would try to tune in tonight to listen to the show. And I think it's going to be a huge show. A lot of people are not aware of what's going on in Australia and the brutal conditions that these people are living in. Because from me growing up here, all I see, this is what the media portrays as these, happy white people in this beautiful country. Honestly, I feel so ignorant. I had no idea that for years that was actually a black country. That was the original people are black people. I had no idea until very recently, maybe a few years ago. And so, like I said, the media always portray this country, this beautiful country. They will always show that huge Grand Opera House. And what is that city? Sydney. That's their. They love to show American Sydney. Something about Sydney. Media is very powerful here in America, and so we are under some type of mind control as well. We may look black, but our minds, our people really don't realize what we're dealing with and who we're dealing with. And I hope this show goes viral. I am going to make sure I share it every day if I can on Facebook, in the group, and like I said, a few people said they would tune in. But I had no idea. So a few years ago. And I can remember my father and my brother watching that movie. What is it, A Rabbit Fence? Is that what it's called? A Rabbit Fence?
Yeah.
Yes.
Rabbit Proof Fence.
And
yeah.
Yeah. It was a documentary. I think they showed it on the Discovery Channel. And I can remember walking in the house and walking in the living room and then watching the movie, and they were just on the edge of their seats. They could not believe, we didn't know. We had no idea that those type of atrocities, those type of conditions were forced on the people there. And I can just remember that, and they're like these really loud, emotional guys, not even emotion, just loud. And you were like, oh, man, you see that? They were like really like amazed and like horrified. They were completely horrified. Because that movie at some point was really just emotional, and so showing the kids being taken away from their parents is what really touched me the most. That just brought me to tears, and the way, like you said, watching them have them, and once they took them away, they were conditioning them. And the movie, seeing the movie portray that, and I couldn't believe it. I could not. Had no idea it was that many people there. And so, like I said, I hope this show, it goes viral. I really do. I think it will. I really think it will. As the word gets out more and more. So.
Well, I can tell you
so
this.
Much for coming on.
Yes, I can tell you this, Sister I said. Wake Up African People is growing very fast. We have I think we've been on a month and a half, or maybe a month on Wake Up African People, and we all have over 5,000 listeners now. So tune in to African People, Wake Up African People, because it's the most informative.
It was 3,000 earlier.
Yes, well, it was 1,000 a week ago. So maybe about 2 weeks ago, it was still in the 1400s. We had the great Dr. Umar on, and the great Phil Valentine on, and the great Brother Cimarron on, and all their shows are in the hundreds and downloads. So this show is, once the people hear this show is definitely one of the best shows that we have made, as far as I'm concerned. And because this information is vital, very vital information to get out to the people. And I just want to talk about my first meeting with a white Australia here in America. I was working on these people's home because I used to do construction work and rehabs, homes, and put tiles and plumbing and all the things that rehab does. And I was working, and the lady, she was traveling across the world backpacking, her and another white guy, and they stayed at this other house, an interracial couple, which I knew the guy, and he had some work, so I was doing the work, and she happened to say I heard her accent, and I said, "You from Australia or Britain or one of the places?" She said, "I'm from Australia." Oh, she started talking about Australia, all nice, and how beautiful the country was, and how she's going all around the world on a backpack and staying here, and then she'd have been all across the world with a backpack. So, me knowing about Australia, I asked her about the Aboriginal people. I said, "Well, how the Aboriginal people, do you see many of them and everything?" The first thing came out of her mouth was they were lazy, they were alcoholics, they didn't work, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. I mean, she totally lambasted the people from over there because she didn't think I knew the history. But once I let her finish, and she said that they get money, that they're being paid checks, that they get checks, monthly checks or twice a month, and they're not worth the money, and they shouldn't be getting anything. They get more than some of them and all this type of stuff, right? So I looked at her. I mean, if I could turn red, but I'm black, if I could turn red, I would have turned completely blood red. And I looked at her, and my eyes probably were blood red. And I said, well, how can you ever pay a people for genociding them and stealing their country? I said, there's no amount of British money in the world that you can give them to compensate them for taking their land and genociding their people and forcing them out of their culture, forcing them into your culture. And by the time I finished with that white girl, she turned so white. I mean, she turned 2 times as white. She turned about 4 colors to me all at the one time. I don't even know why they call us colored people anyway. They're the ones that turn colors. They burn with the sun, they turn red. In the winter, they turn white. If you punch them, they turn black and blue. They're color people. They're going to talk about the Aboriginal people. Excuse me. But you have to laugh from keeping on, keep from crying. You know what I'm saying? But these people here are wicked. They are the most wicked, evilest people in the universe, Father Son. I don't think there's nothing can beat them. They're talking about the devil. The devil ain't shit compared to these evil people. We are living with the devil. So these people, like I said before, these people need to be put off the face of the earth. Like Dr. Cabone said. Dr. Cabone said everything on earth is finished unless white people disappear. I'm not going to say the word he said because they messed with him. He had to leave out of the college. His son had to leave out the country. I mean, they really messed with him when he said that. That's what needs to happen before the world can be back the way it is, the way it was, rather. But these people are very, 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 very wicked, and you better wake up, black people. Black people around the world, you better open up your eyes and see these people for who they really are, and stop romancing with these people. Right down there in I think it's Queensland, they had African Americans back in World War II. And the black African Americans in World War II had they massacred their white captains and what do you call them, people that are head of the army. The leadership of the army. Let's put it that way. Yeah, the generals, the leadership, the captains, the sergeants. They massacred them because I don't know if it was over white women or over them being racist, but they actually was over there fighting a war for them people. Why at the same time that they might have had, some of the Aboriginals somewhere else fighting in part of World War II, and they didn't even know. They told them that the Aboriginals were lazy, they were drunks, don't trust them. The same thing they tell Africans that come here and all the other black people that come here about us. Don't trust them, they steal, they're criminals, and all these things. They do that everywhere they go. I have an African friend that told me that they show a movie. They don't tell you straight up that black people is, but guess who's starring in the crime movie? Black people in America are starring. So, Sister Kaylee, you told me that some black people from America and from Africa and all of them come over there, and then they be acting like they can't understand what the Aboriginal is going through. Could you touch on that, please?
Yeah, no, they be acting like we're just terrible people. They told not to come near us. They are told what that white woman told you, the white woman that you met from Australia. They are told that we're drunks, that we're lazy, that we'll roll you for your Nikes, we'll roll you for your mobile phone, we're dangerous, we're criminals, we're violent, we don't like to work, we spend all our welfare money on drink and drugs. So this is the idea that migrants and visitors, tourists, get told when they come here. Africans, Indians, whatever, any group of people that come here is told to stay away from us, and they've given this idea from white people about us, which is I can't say not true apart from the crime and we're violent, but in terms of alcoholism and drugs and and unemployment, that's an issue. But they fail to look at the cause of that. No person want to be in our shoes. No, we don't like living like this. I don't like seeing my people on paydays, 15 or 16 of them together walking with a carton of beer. I don't like seeing that, but I don't blame them. I don't blame them for doing that because there's no hope. They can't get up and go to work every morning. They're not allowed to. They're not given that right to work. So what are we meant to do? So naturally you're going to turn to substances to stop the pain, stop the grief. You're going to do that. That's a natural thing that a human would do to turn to substances. Most people, not all, I should recant that, but I don't blame my people at all. And this is the idea that not only just what white people say, media portray this as well. Media portrays this. There's nothing on Australian media that's good about us. Nothing. Primetime television, 6 o'clock, if there's a report on Aboriginal people, it's bad. It's something bad. It's never anything positive.
They do that here.
Yeah. Well, talk about how they have all the Aboriginal. See, it's going on here, too, with black people in the prison industrial complex. Talk about how they got all the Aboriginal brothers locked up.
Yeah, Aboriginal people are, I think, 17 times likely to be arrested, and I think 14 times more likely to be incarcerated once they go through the court process. In 2009, I think it is alone, there was 20,000 people, Aboriginal people in prison, both men and women. I think women comprise, depending also on the location, because you've got to remember that our numbers in the cities is severely reduced. And we don't have black neighbourhoods. That's another thing. There's no black neighbourhoods. We're all dispersed within white Australia. This is a white country. If you come in, you will not see an Aboriginal person if you get off the plane. Unless you go seeking to look for an Aboriginal person, you will not see one. So we're only talking about a small number of people. Like I said earlier, white Australia jails, its black population far greater than black South Africans. So if you remove, what was the figure, 4,000 per 100 out of 500,000 people, that's a big dent. It's a big dent of people that's removed from society. And these crimes that they're going to jail for are not serious crimes. It's crimes like assault or break and enter, or usually driving unregistered vehicle, or driving while suspended, driving without a licence. Most blackfellas have warrants out, so they'll just, get checked for warrants and then go to jail. So they're not going to jail for terrible, horrendous crimes. Like white people claim we're violent. We're not going to jail for those crimes. Actually, they're the ones going to jail for those crimes here, not us.
And touch on the, because this happens in America too, the color problem with Aboriginal people that was raped and forced to be victimized sexually by white people are light-skinned now, and the darker Aboriginals that live out in the outback, or maybe some that live in the city. How is that? How do they treat each other? I hear it's like, well, America's, the light-skinned, dark-skinned dynamics is changing, but tell us, we do have some claiming they biracial and all that, but, it's not a big number, because it's popular to be black right now.
That's starting to become an issue now for us. It's not as bad as this light skin versus dark skin going on in the United States, but it's slowly starting to become an issue here. Like I said with the Tasmanian Aboriginals, they fair in skin complexion, but they're treated as that. They're discriminated against as if they're black because they identify as Aboriginal. So skin tone got nothing to do with it. It's your cultural heritage that they look at. If you're Aboriginal, there was one girl that did get served in a pub in Kalgoorlie, which is it's a mining town in Western Australia. She was fair in complexion, and she said she was Aboriginal. The publican of that pub refused to serve her, no matter she was fair-looking Aboriginal. She was refused service and had to leave the pub. So they don't discriminate in terms of what colour your skin is. If you're Aboriginal, you're Aboriginal, and they treat you as such. Problem with that now, because there's some Aboriginal people that's becoming, they're making money off their Aboriginality. So Aboriginality is becoming like an industry where you can advance your career out of it. If you've got, if your grandfather was part Aboriginal and that's the only Aboriginality you got in you, you can get a proof of Aboriginality signed. And that form, I don't even know when that form came in, but it's been in for a good few years now. That every Aboriginal person in Australia has to have that form signed. If you want to access services like legal services, health services, you want to go to school or access any services that got to do with Aboriginal issues, you need that form to access services, health, dental, legal, whatever, educational, whatever you need to prove. We have to prove to the Australian government that we are Aboriginal. Otherwise, we can't have access to those services.
That's
so
crazy.
You get a lot of these people, it's terrible. And we all have to have one. I have one. All my children have one. We need that. Otherwise, we can't get access to any services. But this form, I think, is becoming an issue because we're getting people who have a great-grandparent or a grandparent that's maybe half Aboriginal, and they will get this form signed, and you need to have this form signed by your community. Usually it's through an Aboriginal organisation when they have their AGM. There's usually elders on that board, community elders, and the proof of Aboriginality becomes part of the agenda through their AGM, and they'll say, okay, we know this person claims that they come from whatever tribe, and it'll just get signed without any questions asked. So this has become a problem.
My sister Kaylee, we are winding down to I think we are almost over the time period, and we want to thank you. And we're going to have to go more on this because there's so much information that you can't do it all in 90 minutes. But look here, we thank you, me and Sister Aset, and she's going to say she thank you herself, but I'm thanking you for both of us right now for coming on the show.
He's speaking for
and we
me,
know we know that it's costing you a lot of money.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
And it's been a privilege to share my story.
Your queen.
Our story. It's been an honour and a privilege to come on your show, and I thank you for having me, sharing our story down here. It needs to be known. And we are at war, Truth Doctor. We are at war, and in war we need allies. No nation of people can get through a war without an ally. We need allies.
Yes. Yes. And me and Sister Aset, we love you because you work with us on the social networks and you help to get the information out. And there's a lot of your people that reject you. We know this. It's a lot of our people that reject us. Most of the people over here reject what we do. So don't think that you're alone in being rejected. Our people reject this too because they're being fed the crumbs off the oppressor's table, and they're satisfied with the crumbs. Why the oppressor runs away with,
they think that's
with
good
the
enough.
guys. So, Sister Aset, you know what to do right now. And good night, Sister Kylie, and I will see
good
you.
Night. Thank you for having me.
In cyberspace.
We're going to have you back soon, hopefully.
All right.
Okay? This should be a once-a-month show.
All right.
I think once a month we should do this. Or try to do it
I think we're going to do it.
This is major. This is really major.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. You're right about that.
Yep. Okay.
Good night,
all right. Thanks for having me. I'm going to hang up. Yes, good night.
Yes.
And thanks for having me. And, I'll see you in cyberspace.
Yes.
Good night.
If I rule the world.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
And thank you all for tuning in to Wake Up African People. I hope that you join us again tomorrow night at, I believe it will be 8:30 for the Prison Industrial Complex show. Good night.